Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of two amazing creative people. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full names, where you're based, and share your stories with us today.
Hey everyone, thank you very much, Gertrude. Thank you to Diversity Connector. My name is Nela Trifković. I'm tuning in from Naarm, from Melbourne, Australia, Victoria. I'm originally from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I was born in Yugoslavia, but nowadays after the war, I'm Bosnian. And my little bit of background is that it's a story of, turning a horrible thing into a wonderful thing. It was sadly the blow up of my original country in the 90s and the Civil War that took me to Australia. But now I have the immense privilege of practicing my way of culture sharing, which in my case is through traditional music and storytelling in Australia. And in Australia, I studied classical Western music, but then returned to what I originally studied, lived, and embodied with my family in the Western Balkans, which is Sevdah, the traditional form of singing, also Sephardic Jewish singing, as well as our cultural storytelling, sharing of poetry, sharing of prose, and the weaving of cultural customs of people of the Western Balkans through the sharing of music. I've been in Australia for about 25 years, and I have been practicing this way of culture sharing for almost 20, but more specifically for the last decade, there's been a project developing in the form of an ensemble or a music band called SARAY Iluminado, which is a project really dear to my heart. And this is a work sort of gathered and developed around this form of knowledge that I carry on a familial, on a cultural, on a historic, you could say on a psycho-spiritual level. And SARAY Iluminado is a 5-piece, often with the guests of like-minded people who enjoy their own cultures as well as learning about other people's culture.
Hi everyone, my name is Lamine Sonko, and I'm very happy and honored to be speaking through Diversity Connector. And thank you very much, Gertrude, for having us to share our story, background, and creativity. I come from Senegal, West Africa, and I've been living in Melbourne, Australia, Naarm, for the past 20 years. And in my practice, I draw on ancient wisdom to create interdisciplinary and multi-sensory arts experiences through film, music, and theater. Inspired by my Senegalese cultural background as a Gewel. My role as a Gewel is to be a keeper and a communicator of history, custom, rituals, and sacred knowledge through the arts. And I learned that through working or collaborating or listening to elders, because both my parents in Senegal come from a lineage of artists and guilds. So we are known as the keepers of our tradition. And from a very young age, I was guided by community elders through observation and participation in rituals that evoke ancient wisdom, that also invoke ways of understanding how the universe works from an African perspective. So since migrated to Australia, I work in different projects. Recently, I'm also the director and founder of the 1312 project, which brings together artists, producers, cultural elders, and academics to create multi-art form works that kind of brings together ancient wisdom in a contemporary setting. So also as a solo artist, I compose music in collaboration with diverse artists here in Australia, particularly in the African community. We try and represent our culture in the diaspora by combining our cultural knowledge, cultural music with modern music to try and tell a story of the present going forward. That's who I am and my background so far.
Wow, thank you both so much. It really excites me to have you both here. You both are a representation of true diversity here in Australia. Australia is a bit of a melting pot, having people from all walks of life. So I guess my first question is, how did you two meet and how did you start working together? Either of you can answer that.
If you remember more
You go
clearly,
ahead, Nela.
I'm trying to remember exactly. So if you've got it, go.
Yeah. I remember meeting you at the VCA when we were both studying there. And at the time, I was studying community cultural development at the VCA. And also, I've seen you perform around and always admire what you do. So it's exciting to see everything going full circle where we're sitting here and collaborating on a new work.
Yeah. And
Very
I was going to say,
exciting.
I feel like I almost met your daughter before I met you, because I saw the film that you were working on before we shook hands, and it was your daughter, age 4 at the time, who's now much older than 4. So that was my first introduction to what you do. And yeah, so, and then I guess we attended a lot of each other's concerts, and something that really struck me, we were talking about this on Sunday in a different interview. I think every time I attended Lamine's works, I thought, why are we just sitting in each other's audience? I don't have this many people that I'm disconnected to aesthetically, artistically, even though you're from West Africa and I'm from the Western Balkans. There's something about approach to work that I recognize, you know, even though I'm yet to learn the vocabulary and much more about West African cultures. There's a thread of way of entering the work that I really recognize and resonate with. And so I'm so glad that 15 years later, that's a lot of coffee.
Wow.
But we've made it. Yeah.
That's right.
So I guess my first question for you, Lamine, is all centered on cultural heritage and artistic practice. You have an impressive background as a Guel, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, of the Sing Sing and the choring of the Kabua. And you're a member of various cultural communities. How do these rich cultural heritages influence your creative process? And how do you balance the preservation of traditional elements with innovation in your work?
Yeah, I guess it's all just having this continuous connection to my culture and background, because as a girl, from a very young age, we learn to memorize songs, rhythms, dance, ritual dance that can tell the story. I always like to use this term as the rhythms has this hidden narrative, and the information in those narratives are what kind of give you this sense of identity. And I guess that's what I try bring in all projects that I work on or when I compose music, because most of the time it's more like me creating a space for dialogue where I can bring this ancient traditional knowledge and try connect it with modern artists or contemporary artists to try tell all this story in a new way.
I love it. And most of African traditions and culture were captured through storytelling as opposed to written communication, right? So
That's
it's
right.
really crucial for the stories to stay alive. And it must be a real honor for you to be in a position to capture such a richness that the African culture has to offer. Absolutely wonderful to see it here in Australia as well. Nela, your artistic practice is rooted in both the Balkan folklore and Western classical traditions. How have these diverse musical influences shaped your approach to compose and perform? And can you share how your style and focus has evolved over your career?
Balkan cultural tradition is similarly to Lamine, is something that I grew up with. My father trained as a scientist, but he culturally trained as a guitarist, as a player of fretted instruments and singer. And a singer, and he very much has that science and artistry connection to him. He sees physics, which is his, I guess you could almost call it social training, very creatively. And then he has his cultural creative training. And I started my singing, I don't even know if I could call it training, way of being with him between the age of 4 and 5. Which was also a year after my parents separated. So I had this, very specific designated time when I was spending time with my father. And one of our primary ways of communing with each other was that for hours on end, like we would have a meal and then we would just sing and play. He would just, we would just do call and response, and he would teach me songs. And I couldn't at that age play an instrument, but he would teach me to clap rhythms, or he would accompany me and I would start. So it became also a very important almost piece of folkloric therapy between us, and a way of my father and I communing in such a way that transcended the family breakup and entered into something deeper and ancient that then we would share forever, and that would really motivate me to keep it with me. And in the same time as training that, he was the person who said, keeping folkloric knowledge is a really, really tough gig. If you really want to be a musician, I really want you to go and study the piano or study a Western instrument. So I'm not a very obedient person, but that bit I did. I went and tried, and at the age of 7, I auditioned. It was still in socialist Yugoslavia, so we had this very affordable, very easily accessible musical training, and basically artistic training was at children's fingertips. If you really wanted to try, it was available too, and there were very affordable schools. And I studied for a really long time and really thought for a time that I wanted to study classical piano, and it's something that actually carried me into the Western world. And it carried me through the war, and it carried me into Australia. And then in Australia, I studied piano, singing, and composition, but something was always missing. So in the early 2000s, I went back for the first time to territories of ex-Yugoslavia, and to spend time with Dad properly after the war, and to travel around. And I started to travel and again train with elders and collect songs and do this, thinking that I was therapizing myself after the war. I was, in the year 2000, I was 20 years old. And I just thought, I'm just doing this, you know, because to find something that I love about my heritage again. Then when I came back to Australia after that trip, there was no turn. I was like, my God, I've just graduated classical piano. I absolutely don't want to do it. I just want to do traditional singing. What am I going to do with all this? You know, I sing in languages that like 6 million people speak in the world. Like, what am I going to do with it? But it's absolutely, that's what I have to do. At 21, in a way, I started again and went back to what I was doing when I was 4 years old, which was also a proof that it's right. When you make a life out of what you were doing as a child that young, there's something so organic to it.
Yes.
So I guess I use, in answer to your initial question, Western music has helped me a lot. I use it as a bridging theory, but I really try to talk, and I score my scores as much as I can for my musicians to provide documentation. But similarly to what you said, a lot of what's happening with the music that I sing, it was scored in the kind of years of socialism in Yugoslavia. But a lot of that music was dumbed down because something that happened after the Second World War in those countries is we had a blow up of a thing called the radio orchestra or a TV orchestra. And they were trying to play folk music on national television.
Right.
Played by classical musicians. So it was quickly scored for them. But a lot of, like what Lamine is saying, a lot of these uneven, a lot of the life, the inner life of the original music was simplified and a little bit dumbed down. So I really love to travel and hear how musically literate people are singing it, because they're singing it from the essence, from the spiritual essence. They're not singing it from sheet music. So I'm trying to do something in between. It's a real project of kind of straddling borders. And Lamine was just in a rehearsal with us last night and could see some of it. Like, you're really trying to swim and go, well, here's the sheet music for you, and here's the chord chart, and can I just sing it for you now? And of course, then they say it's nothing like what it looks like on the page. And so it's like immigration. We're constantly finding the middle path between the provided documentation and my lived experience, and honoring the people that play with me who come from all sorts of backgrounds and their generosity in engaging with this music. So it's like you're always cooking a very complex dish. That's the best way I can say it.
So, Lamine, why is it important for us to preserve our ways? We are so far away from home. We're so far away from our original cultures. We're all implants here in Australia. In terms of celebrating diversity, why is it important for us to remember where we're from and to preserve our way of being while we're trying to assimilate living in a foreign country?
Yeah, I think it's very important because it's a way to present who we are and to also walk with the knowledge and the gift of our ancestors. Because knowing the self, knowing where you come from, what's your culture, what are the meaning of the rituals that create biology 101, helps you to come out of the village and give you the courage to make the journey into the diaspora. But when you're there, we believe that we walk with the energy of our ancestors. We walk with the DNA of our ancestors. Therefore, anything you do, you got the blessing and the help to reach that communication with our ancestors and the knowledge system. For me, that's what give me the get up and go. For me, you know, like having I don't have all the, let's say, the resources to do a proper Gewel rituals here in Melbourne, but just knowing that I have the ancestors working with me or walking with me allows me to imagine, you know, that is doable, and that imagination manifests itself by connecting with other musicians who are from different parts of Africa or different part of the world, and using ancient knowledge as a foundation That's ways I find connection in a current way. That's also how I create work in the current way. So I believe it's very important because it allows the continuation of what makes us African.
Yeah, and especially for the next generation of young Africans growing up and living in Australia, that knowing of where they come from and being grounded in their roots, I think creates a more stable human being than somebody who's feeling a little disjointed, not belonging here, not belonging there. And we do stand on the shoulders of giants, really. Our ancestors are with us, and remembering that is a good thing. And the other thing about music, though, is it keeps the language alive. A culture dies when language is taken away, correct?
That's right. That's why I see the power.
And people remember songs.
That's right. It's so true. And I guess that's why ancestors put lots of their knowledge system in the chanting we chant. Yes. You know, the simple songs we do, the call and responses we do to connect with one-on-one, and to also develop a non-verbal way of communicating. Because no matter where you come from, we connect with our heartbeat. We connect with ways of feeling. You know, that's what we call in my culture xam-xamu yëg-yëg. Xam-xamu yëg-yëg is an embodied form of knowledge. It's like an embodied form of carrying yourself in connection with other cultures, because you can find those ancient concepts in many different cultures, you know. And what is reminding us is to be human, and music is an amazing platform to have those nonverbal communication and to also overcome barriers of race, or barriers of class and so forth, and just dive in these melodic ways of connecting with different spheres of existence.
Yeah, music is really a unifying force. It's fascinating that you're able to perform here. So to go back to you, Nela, you have a passion for working in environments that blend professional artistry with members of the CALD and BIPOC communities. What strategies do you employ to foster an inclusive and collaborative creative environment? And can you share a particularly impactful project or experience from this work?
Where possible, and where, you know, because we sort of deal in a world that's different to perhaps our non-Western worlds, but sometimes where possible, if I can eat with people before I sing with them, one of my strategies is breaking bread. Yes. And I find that breaking bread is a really important thing. And then, you know, going into singing and kind of creating caretaking through singing environment for people is a really, really powerful strategy. In the recent years, I've been working on and off with a couple of different choirs that community members of all ages, but often sort of our elders and our mature age community members are doing. And that's been a real privilege, even though I'm somebody who's a professional practicing artist, you know, to be looking after a community choir, even if they're doing it as a hobby, of my cultural elders, where I'm looking after them vocally speaking, let's say, but they're actually looking after me energetically, emotionally, spiritually, on so many levels. It's been a real honor to connect with the Bosnian community in that way, and to sort of, you know, to walk into rooms where you literally have like 10 sets of your parents, grandparents, and all sorts of elders, and to look after them and prepare them for performance. And also, what I find incredibly moving is when I'm in a position that I can help my elders tap into their inner child still.
Yes.
They're at an advanced stage. And also they're in an advanced stage in a vulnerable environment that doesn't fully understand them, that doesn't fully comprehend their value. Maybe just 2 hours a week with their inner child is the pinnacle of their week.
Yes.
And I find that's that transformative thing where I really enjoyed working in the community sectors and seeing how touched our community elders are to be with us, and also seeing people like myself when they see us present our concerts. I remember last year there was this 25 people from the Bosnian community that came to my concert. Actually, Lamine, you were in that concert in the Melbourne Recital Centre. And the first thing they said, I came out and they all wanted to shake my hand, and and then of course they all actually wanted to hug. Shaking hands is this Western thing that we took on when we go to Western venues, and everybody said the same thing. Thank you, daughter. We've arrived in the Australian society.
Wow.
And what they meant was that we were in the recital centre.
Yes.
Really, really powerful moment for me. Like, yeah. It was
and
like
it's interesting that you brought up the subject of food. In Zimbabwe, we have a proverb. It's "Hukama igasha, rinosungwa nechikafu," and it basically means friendship is like the threads of fabric, which is woven together with the breaking of bread. So unless you have sat down with somebody in their home and had a meal that you've cooked, you're not really a friend. Meeting at a cafe or whatever, that's not friendship. It's when you come home with this person and you take the time to cook them a meal and you break bread together. That's where the tightness of the friendship is formed. So I love the fact that you brought up food, because food is a very big part of our culture in Africa. And it's interesting that you've tapped into that as well. So to go back to you, Lamine, your work spans multi-disciplines across music, film, theater. Can you describe your process for integrating these different art forms into a cohesive and performance or a project? And what challenges do you face when combining these mediums, and how do you overcome them?
Thank you for a great question. Most of my work is informed by some practice-based research I've been doing lately. Like some of my latest work is informed by, let's say, 6 to 7 years of practice-based research, where I've been going back and forth in Senegal to meet with the Lebu elders in Dakar and meet with the Serer elders in the north of Senegal, inland, and also work and research and sat and talk with Mandingo communities in the south of Senegal. And I've just been doing that as ways to try and respect and honor the diverse cultures we have within Senegal. Because all of those cultures I just named, I have family connections with it. My dad is from the south, which are the Mandingo people, extended coming from the Mali Empire, migrated down to Senegal. My mom from the Serer tribe, who they believe they traveled down from Egypt all the way to West Africa. So I've been following their journey and following the stories that are dated back. Like I've met with some Lebu and Serer elders who took me back to 7,000 years of oral story. Like hearing those stories, the music, the chanting, the drummings that were happening on that kind of just opened my eyes to a new universe of African history and culture in a different way, like totally different to what the perspectives I had about my culture. I just it took me way back. And I think those are the things that inform the way I create this multi-art form or interdisciplinary projects, because I think that just music is not enough to tell these stories. That's why I integrate film in it, because some of the ways culture were transmitted was through movement, others is through rhythms, others through storytelling. So I just kind of use that as different mediums and different platforms to give the right, let's say, the right way of telling those stories. You know, to allow the audience who connect to my work or come to see my shows to connect with the visuals, the film, the sound, and also the environment of where those stories come from. You know, that's why that's what informed how I compose music as well. But like most of the music, traditional music that I been recording and collaborating with different classical musicians, musics that were not written. It was all taught orally. So having that, you know, work in this space sometimes is very challenging because some of the musicians come from music schools where it's all about reading, you know, the scores and knowing what it is. And the music that I was presenting to them was not in a written form. So we have to sit in the room, push away the instrument, listen to these stories, and listen to me sing the songs. And we try and, you know, integrate those sounds into our instruments and try and give meaning that it has without losing, you know, itself through translation. So some of those things can be challenging, but it's also a beautiful challenge because it's a challenge that allows me myself to find ways to tell these stories and also allow my collaborators to experience new perspective in music composition. So those are, you know, if I just touch the surface, those are the insights to how I compose, and it's also a bit about the challenges we face. But I think in the end, it just is a way to digest new information for many people, you know, starting from myself to my collaborators. And I think being an artist is like a privilege and a luck, because it's like using the inspiration or the imagination to tell a story in the way that is kind of accessible in an artistic way.
To go back to you, Nela, you've had a notable contributions with the Australian theatre makers, particularly in the international theatre festivals. How does your background in music influence your work in theatre and vice versa? And what are the unique challenges and rewards of creating music for theatrical performances?
I guess in the world of music, certainly when it came to studying classical music in Australia, partly because of this cultural music background that I had, I was always the odd one, and I was always described as the theatrical musician because I always needed more processes. A bit like what Lamine was saying, even though I sort of educated myself to provide documents and score things, to truly work with me, often you needed more processes with me. Like, you know, it needed me to talk, to sing, to once then to do a little bit of movement, to just really try and multi-demonstrate my music beyond the page to when I was presenting to people. And this led to me sort of being relegated into the composition department. And someone said, you should just write music for theater. You would get on much better with actors than you would with musicians, I guess, in the Western world. So that led me to there. And that kind of multidisciplinary way of working certainly appealed to them. But, you know, I often have a bit like, I mean, you know, you have challenges of your cultural background and ways of sharing music. And then once you train in one discipline, you have those similar challenges psychologically, spiritually, in terms of my living dynamic. I often relate to theater people better because sometimes they display this more multisensory nature to me than some of the Western musicians. But then I also have these tropes of a Western musician now. So I guess for me, it's always negotiating, like through migration, through training, through our cultural thing. I imagine, like, you know, characters like myself, like, I mean, we've always been multidimensional beings, but now you're even more pushed to be a multiplicity of a human being, because you're always operating in an environment where you're going, which bit of me do I, which of my many feet do I put forward, not just two? What one will work the best in this? What one is the truest to me in this situation? So I'm always negotiating that thing of, if you think about, I'm not a practicing Sufi or anything, but I read and I'm very inspired by Sufism as a way of communing with something greater than yourself. And I love the notion of the 7 subtleties of Sufism. And I think of myself as, humans have 7,000 subtleties, and you're always negotiating which one of my subtleties will best serve this environment, and which one will best serve and engage in the best dialogue. So I guess I just try to watch and listen a lot. And when I enter those environments, I like to find out, rather than saying, "Hi everyone, I'm the composer," what does the room do? What, do you sing, do you play? What music does this room practice, and how do they best do it? So I just try to go and craft around who I'm working with.
Lamine, let's go back to you and talk about impact and outreach. Through projects like 13.12 and your role as a director and composer for the theatre work Griot, you actively engage with artists, cultural elders, and academics. What are your goals in these collaborations, and how do you measure the impact of these interdisciplinary projects on audiences and participants?
I guess through 1312 is a project that I come up with 6 years ago, because I do many different works. Like I run another organization called the Knowing Project, and Knowing Project shares ancient African knowledge system through schools. So I work in education, in education departments to help design some music education programs for schools to tackle multiculturalism, or to face multiculturalism, or to find ways to communicate and help new migrants into Australia to settle and find equality in the school setting. So I work with a lot of schools to design projects like that. So I'm always connected to the educational sector. Sometimes I also do guest lecturing at Melbourne University, and also ANU, Australian National University, where I go and talk about West African history. So I go from primary school all the way to university, talking to different educators to find ways we can take this embodied knowledge system into academia, or take it to different places, to just make it more accessible to those who are not into art, or who don't know much about their culture. So through literature, they can at least engage with it, or through forums where I go and deliver a lecture. So that's what inspired me to come up with that project, to create a space for dialogue, to a dialogue that allows everyone to bring their ideas into the table, and we find ways of communicating and ways of connecting as well, because I just believe that all of those platforms are very valuable to the community, are very valuable to art, and are also very valuable for future generation. And I think that doing it in the arts is one way, but doing it through education is another way. So I try create connections and do outreach, and try and connect with different industries to make sure that we can further promote what we do, and also allow dialogue between, let's say, universities to communities, or between the art sectors to communities as well. So I just try and be a connector between worlds, or between platforms.
Going back to you, Nela, with the rich career spanning various continents and artistic disciplines. What are your aspirations for the future? And are there any new artistic territories or collaborations or community projects that you're eager to explore in the coming years?
I sort of feel a little bit like, you hit a point of no return. Now we're all on a pathway, and this is the pathway. It's about sort of who you're accessing next. So one of the things that really interests me and that I find very important, there are sort of two elements to it. One is to be working in these environments, like a little bit like the new concert that Lamine and I are preparing, where I'm really invested in breaking the stereotypical narratives that happen in Australia. And sadly, they even enter this multicultural domain where, like when we first put together this concert, we were seen as this unlikely team because we're siloed by prescriptive multiculturalism. Like, this is a West African artist and I'm a West Balkan artist, and I'm sort of seen to, I'm matched with Mediterranean and Balkan artists with whom I have cultural resonances, but really geographic proximity becomes a banality when you strike some deeper relationships with people. And that's precisely why we practice what we practice. And to me, that's precisely the value of ancestral knowledge, is that you're showing how much chronology can be banal, not banal, but chronology doesn't sustain you alone. Geographic proximity doesn't sustain you alone. I'm looking to my ancients to show myself a way forward. And so it's really important to play with people with whom you're soul aligned and sing with, not just people who come necessarily from a neighboring country, which might make a better press release or an easier press release to come up with. But so that's something very important to me, is that we maintain being these little revolutions, if you like, which are actually not very revolutionary at all. We're just very, very aligned people, but that we actually keep breaking the stereotypes and we keep collaborating and we keep shining the light on one humanity, which is what ancestral knowledge is actually shining the light on. If we all turned more to ancestral knowledge, I think we would be invested in love as a supreme ideology. We would go beyond race, beyond class, beyond religion. I think that that's really what our ancestors are showing in the constellations and, in all these ways. And so that's something really important to me, particularly in Australia. I'm not going to solve and resolve all Australian problems. They started way before me. But you can be a thread in the fabric. Of, if we keep turning this way, there is something here. And the other part of that is in the recent years, in like really connecting with these other artists from my sort of background, and with a lot of artists who, some of us really, did we really ever find ourselves after the collapse of Yugoslavia? I don't know. As a child, I was going to play the piano for that country. I studied to play the piano for Yugoslavia, and then one day there was no Yugoslavia anymore. And that was almost like my second parents' divorce. Was I got divorced from the country as a small child. So connecting with those artists from the 6 countries, or now 6 independent countries that were once the states of former Yugoslavia, and continuing to be agents in each other's healing. So one of the shows that I'm working on after our show gathers women poets from Macedonia, from Bosnia, from Serbia, where we step up and we artistically show our war-torn communities just how alike we are and how beautifully we still, rub shoulders with each other.
Final question for you, Lamine. With the various accolades and successful projects already under your belt, what future projects are you excited about? And are there any new areas or challenges where you're looking to explore in your upcoming works?
I've been recently working on a theater production called Gewel, which is my heritage, to talk about the knowledge system of the Gewel, and which is also dives into this ancient African cosmovision, where ancestors told us that each individual must connect with the cosmos, spirituality, and nature. So the work explores that ancient African cosmovision, and it's been in development for the past 3 years. And in the work, I'm collaborating with the Senegalese National Theatre, where I just returned from, and spent 3 months at the National Theatre Sorano in Dakar, Senegal, working with artists in there in making this latest project, Gewel Come Alive. So that's something that I'm really excited about, and I guess we are aiming to tour that show in Australia next year in partnership with Arts House and lots of other partners we're discussing at the moment. And also, finally, very excited to be collaborating with Nela on this gathering performance, because it's again bringing all these amazing artists in one place, all these diverse artists in one place, to try promote culture and to also share ancient rituals. Because I'll be joined by amazing collaborators here in Melbourne, playing amazing classical music, and I'll be bringing West African harp, the kora, and bring storytelling, and share some, the importance of dance and rhythms in this fabric of what we call ancient rituals. So those are amazing things that I'm excited about, which are the 2 projects and the latest gig I'm about to do with Nela. And the challenges is just us again trying to advocate for cultural art, cultural knowledge, where we can find space where migrants or multicultural communities can have a space to share their ancient knowledge, to share their artistry, and to also connect with the wider Australian community. Because let us not forget that Australia has a very strong indigenous culture, which when us Africans looking at how important is their culture, mirror us how we see our culture and how we value our culture. So I guess the obstacle is how can we create a platform where our voice can be heard, our artistry can be acknowledged, and also in the way that we can share our work and inspire newcomers or the younger generation in following forward. So mainly we are just creating a platform, a secure space where everyone can come and feel themselves. So yeah, that's something that I really find valuable.
Wow. Well, thank you both for coming online today and sharing your stories. It's a real example of how cross-cultural understanding can be bridged through art and music and song and dance. Do not tire. Thank you both for coming in my mother tongue. I would say to you, ndatenda zvikuru, kutenda kwakiti kuri mumwoyo, which means I thank you from the bottom of my heart. The gratitude of a kitten can only be seen in its heart. So you can feel when a kitten is happy. So thank you both so much for coming on today and sharing with us.
Thank you, Gertrude. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Tuned in today. This is what the Diversity Connector is all about. It's about bringing you stories and voices of people from all over the world, celebrating our diversity to bridge the gaps of misunderstanding between cultures. And today's illustration has been through music, through dance, through theater. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview some more amazing guests. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. Thank you again, everybody.
That's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open, and definitely stay